There comes a time in every person's life when you realise it's not about doing what you are told, but doing what you know is right for you. Let us take a journey of learning and discovery with the world's most successful people who are living the life of their dreams, walking through life using their inner wisdom and being of service to others. Forget exams, grades and test scores. What is your purpose? As we let go of what we think should be and learn from our elders to gain knowledge, inspiration and a true sense of who we are. What are your dreams? Does your life have meaning? Are you living a life of significance? Let's talk with today's guest. Hello and welcome as we spend some more time together on the Learning on Fire podcast. Today I'm talking to Jonathan Oakes. Hi Jonathan, thanks for joining me and let's explore the journey of who you are.
Hey Mark, it's great to be here.
Can you give us a little bit of background about who you are and what you're currently doing in your life?
Well, I am a 41-year-old person in Jacksonville, Florida, and in my day job, I'm an IT manager, and my every other waking moment, I'm a podcaster. I run the trivia game show called Trivial Warfare. We are one of the largest trivia podcasts in the world, and we have a ton of fun every week putting on trivia games.
And I'm really interested to dive into this almost straight away in terms of, this podcast is about, what we've learned and also following our dreams and our heart in terms of what we do. So tell us a little bit about that sort of relationship between your day job, which is obviously something, I assume that it's something that you enjoy doing. I know it's something that you're interested in, as opposed to having this sort of passion for the podcast that you obviously then went in to set up.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to think about. So something that I've found over time as I've gone through my career is that there are people who put their heart and passion into their day job, right? Into a lot of times a corporate kind of job, whether it's teaching or being a business person or an investor or whatever it is. And putting your heart into a job is marvelous. It's a great way to succeed, but it's also a great way to really live and die with a business that you don't control, right? And so I have found as I get older, and especially as I started the show, I was always kind of searching for more. As I started the show and we started to grow it, I found that I was really engaging all of my passion and my heart in the work that I was producing with the show. And so now in my relationship with my job, which is fine, it pays the bills and it's a good job. I'm glad to have it. And I do good work, but when I get home, I kind of leave the job at the job, and I don't have my whole heart in that job as much as I do great work, because that's a company that's doing their best for them. And now I've learned about doing my best for me, which doesn't have to be wrapped up in a company. And so that's a really powerful thing that I've learned over the last couple of years.
And I think for the people listening is the fact that there are people who are literally living their dream every second of every day. But there is also the reality that sometimes there's a shift, isn't there, from one way of being to the other. For those listening who are still at school, for example, you can't suddenly say, I'm now not going to go to school because I want to go and explore X, Y, or Z, because actually legally you have to go to school or you need to be homeschooled. There needs to be some kind of structure in there. So it's being aware, I think, of those things that you do have in your life, which you need to do, or you have obligations, or maybe it's a job, but then actually, like you said, spending that time, spending that energy actually on the things that you do love, and then allowing those either start to merge or they start to separate in a way where you can actually focus your time exactly where you want it to be.
100% agree. And just to put a finer point on it, I could not do what I'm doing with the show if I hadn't developed through my career in business. Who I am and who I've become over time has been honed, or if it has been sharpened through my time in the business world. And even before that, when I was younger and I was trying to break into radio, I wanted to be a broadcaster. I wanted to do all these great things and be in front of cameras, etc. And so that wasn't a successful endeavor, but I learned so many things from it that I could not be successful at what I'm doing now if I hadn't gone through those experiences. And so trying to jump straight to the end game of something without putting in the time or work is never going to be a successful strategy.
Yeah, I mean, being accepting of where you are, if it's your ideal place, or even if you feel like you're working towards it, or even if it's difficult. I think you're right. I think actually accepting where you are and knowing it's actually part of the overall fabric of being able to fulfill what it is that you want to do is a really key thing to take away. So yeah, thanks so much for that. I think that's really, really important. What does your life look like now, and how is it different from when you were growing up? And that may well be sort of location based, or it might just be, from a financial point of view, or, I mean, what is different, and what do you notice about it?
You know, the thing that strikes me every day is the difference in my social life and outlook on the world. And this is all something that's kind of shifted more in the last 10 years and even more in the last 3 years than previously. So in my young life, I was a nerd who wanted to try and fit in and not be a nerd, right? I didn't want to be the dork. I didn't want to be the kid who was overly smart but didn't have any friends. And unfortunately for me, I couldn't break out of that mold. I had a terrible childhood. I did not have a lot of friends. I didn't go to parties. I didn't get invited anywhere, and none of that. And so that was my experience growing up. And then that kind of experience in your early formative years, let me not generalize, that kind of experience in my formative years led me to be an angry person. And so I'm kind of a rebellious person at heart. That's my nature, is to challenge things. And so for me, I was a person in my 20s where, okay, if society rejects me or if people reject me, then I'm going to actively reject them. And I became a much more angry person that nobody wanted to be around, and I liked it that way. So that was a period in my life that I'm not very proud of, frankly. But over the last, call it 10 years or so, as I've matured and I've grown up, and I lost a lot of weight at one point, and I started to have people reacting to me differently. That created a shift within me, where as I found that I wasn't disliked anymore, I wasn't being put upon, I wasn't having those negative experiences all the time. I started to shift, and as I started to shift, people started to shift around me. And so I've learned over time that you kind of create your own environment based on how you respond to things and how you act. And then now, the most dramatic change is I went from that period of starting to mature and grow, where I developed what I would consider the normal amount of friendships. You have two or three good friendships and a bunch of acquaintances, but not people that you hang out with all the time. That's totally normal. Even one good friend is amazing, right?
Absolutely.
But now in my life today, because of what we've done with the show, I've kind of created a community of trivia lovers. And when I say created, I think it's probably better to say that what we've done has become a focal point for a lot of people who are just like me. And I've become, through my life, a very open and honest person. And so when I share with all of these people, they resonate with me really well. And so now my life is overflowing with friendships. And I mean that I literally, it's the most amazing feeling, and I soak it in. I love every minute of it. A couple of weeks ago, we had a couple of people who were vacationing in the area, maybe 30 minutes away, and they called and they wanted to come hang out. Have something next week where people who live 30 minutes south of us have called and they want to come hang out. I threw a party, a successful party. We had 12 or 13 people, and there were people in the pool, and it was just, it's just been amazing to see the difference now in my life, where I feel that in any direction I look in, I feel support, and I feel positivity, and I feel love. And as a result, it can't help but come inside of me and get transformed and then pushed back out. And so I'm finding that I feel better towards everybody, and I love so many more people, and I want to help, and I want to create positive things and create positive experiences for other people, and it becomes this really awesome cycle that is super powerful. And that's the life I'm living in right now as a result of what's been happening. And so that's just a hugely different life than I ever imagined I would be living.
And what I really love about that is that you can really see that the whole arc of that, from, like you said, from that sort of child at school and the whole sort of not going to parties to having those close friends and those acquaintances that will come to your house for parties. And for those listening who haven't come across the podcast before, there are whole meetups, aren't they, all the way across the US, where wherever you happen to be, sometimes you go and meet them and hang out and have a massive sort of get together with that as well. So it's sort of that immediate inclusion, and also this sort of extra fan base, which then just sort of comes out and supports you as well.
It's been amazing. So for work, I've had to travel a little bit, and for different conferences, I travel. And whenever I'm going to be outside of my own area, I let everybody know I'm going to be here. If anybody wants to get together, let's do it. And so I've met friends. I did an Ohio trip. I met friends all over Ohio. We had a meetup in Philadelphia. We had a get together in New Jersey. We did some in New York. I met people in different places in Virginia, Los Angeles. It's just been incredible. I'm doing an LA meetup in November in a couple of weeks here. And so, yeah, it's just think about that. Think about being able to say, hey, I'm going to X place. If there's anybody here, come say hi, let's get together and let's go play a trivia game, because that's what we do. And in almost each place, sometimes it's been as few as 4, and a group of 4 is fabulous. Sometimes it's been as many. We had in Boston when the Geek Bowl, which is a giant pub quiz competition, was in Boston this year. I did a meetup, and we had 35 people. We actually rented out a space in the original building that inspired the TV show Cheers. It's called the Bull and Finch. And so we had the downstairs room all to ourselves, and we had a room full of people that all had so many things in common. And now, though, I'm rambling a little bit, but one of my favorite things is all of these people who now they're my friend, but they're friends with each other now too. They get to know each other. We've had people move across the country to live closer to each other. It's been insane. It's so cool. And so watching positive relationships spring up in lives all over the country because they met through what we're doing. Oh man. You want to talk about inspiring. I get inspired by my audience. It's so awesome. I love it.
It's such an amazing journey, that, and I hope people listening can really sort of, if you feel like you're isolated, if you feel like maybe you'd like to have more friends, or you feel like you'd like to be more included in what's going on around you, just listen to that story from that one extreme all the way to, like you said, meeting up all over the country with people and having friends come round and pool parties and all of that. Life can look very different, and it's just a question of how you put yourself out there, how you come across and perceive yourself, and what you're able to give out, because you more than get that back from those around you. So really, really great advice there. You talked a little bit about what your school experience was like in terms of that sort of parties and feeling slightly sort of out of sync with everyone else. But what was valuable about your school experience, do you think?
Well, learning how to have a thicker skin, possibly. I mean, doing a trivia game show, it's funny, the relationship between what I do for a hobby and hopefully future for a permanent business, and schooling, because there are so many tie-ins between wanting to know things and whether or not you learned them. And so something that I find that I look back on fondly about my education experience is I had the seeds sown for certain things, right? You don't really, when you're in primary education, when you're going through elementary school or high school or whatever the case is, you don't really have time to dig deep. You don't have time, as much as it seems like that's 12 years, you're gonna be an expert at something. You don't become an expert at anything in high school by the time you're out and choose to go to college or not. Um, you're, I say you, I mean me, and to an extent, I believe other people mirror this experience. Um, you're exposed to so many different things. All you're really trying to do is get a semester of exposure to each thing or a firmer grounding in something like English or maths or whatever the case is. But those chances to study American history or European history or to study physics or to study chemistry, those things I was able to discover what I'm interested in and what I'm not. And as I've gotten older, I find something like geography. I'm starting to really love geography, and it's tying back to history because geography determines history. A lot of the things that happen in the world happen because of the way people have assigned borders and then what resources are on which sides of the borders, right? And so I find myself going back to my education and realizing I learned this piece and I didn't understand how this piece fit into the bigger part of the world, but now I do. And I really love being able to do that with the things that I was taught so long ago.
And which teachers do you remember and why? And does that sort of tie in with some of those things that you remember from that sort of school experience?
You know, the most memorable teacher I had, and he's passed away sadly. He's actually, there's two. Um, the first, his name was Mr. Riddell, and Mr. Riddell I had in the 11th grade for American history. Did I have him for American history or world history? I think I actually had him in the 10th grade for world history. It gets fuzzy the older I get, to be honest with you.
Okay, I can relate to that.
It really does. He was a challenging man. He he used to say that he would teach based on the Socratic method, which for him meant that he would lecture for a couple of minutes and then throw questions out to you and expect you to have paid enough attention or to have done the homework to be able to answer the questions. And it put you on the spot and it made you pay attention because if you didn't, you were going to look like an idiot in front of everybody, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think the thing that stood out the most about him was he expected you to do the work in a meaningful way. So I don't want this to come across poorly, but I believe that there are teachers who are resigned to the fact that they can't control their students, right? And so they do their best. They assign the work. They put everything in place to help a child be successful if the child embraces it. But if they don't, it's like, okay, well, I can't make that happen. And the difference in Mr. Riddell is that he expected you to be operating at a higher level. And if you didn't, you would hear about it. There was never any give up. It was always a challenge. And for me, like I said, I'm a rebel at heart. I'm a challenging person at heart. That really spoke to me, where it's like, okay, I'm rising up to this challenge. I remember there's a 10-page paper that was due, I think it must have been 10th grade, for his class, and I was assigned the topic of the the Mexican Revolution from 1910 to 1920. And I ended up writing 30 pages as a sophomore in high school because I just got so in depth into it that I couldn't not keep writing. I couldn't fit it into 10 pages, and I wasn't a very good editor back then. I still remember what he wrote on that paper. I got a 99 out of 100, and on the paper he wrote that it was a Herculean effort. And it was a great feeling because he knew that I was capable of a lot more than I was giving. And in that moment, I knew that he had respected the work that I did. And that was really meaningful to me. And the other teacher, Ramsey Mead, was an English teacher for early lit, like ninth grade literature. And he was our brain brawl coach. Brain brawl is a extracurricular activity, which is like a trivia game where you would even compete on television, on the public television shows here in the city, and you'd compete against other schools' teams. And so I did that for 3 years, maybe 4 years. And he was the coach every year, and he poured so much of his time into us. He was such a good, good man. And he sacrificed a lot of his own personal time, and his efforts really shaped my ability to do what I've done today. If not for him and the time that he poured into us as part of that team, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. And so I have a lot of respect for him.
I like that on sort of on the two different levels there. There's the person that actually you connected with in terms of the content that you were doing, like you said, about that particular extracurricular idea, and then from there the personality and the character of that teacher to be able to be something that you admired and really supported you. And then the first teacher, just that ability that it was all about you and your character and what you felt about yourself that he brought out. It's not even necessarily a passion of that particular subject, but them connecting with you as a person. And that seems to be a really important thing that's coming across as I chat to so many people, that the sense of, it's about who you are and your relationship with any teacher or any person that you come in contact with. And sometimes it's on a very sort of subject based or a theme of something that you're doing in your life, and sometimes it's just on a much more sort of human level. And I think actually you're opening your eyes so that you can see all of this happening around you, no matter what your circumstances, just suddenly starts to give you an idea that life has a big fabric, it's a big tapestry of all manner of things that you're learning, and it's not just a question about being in school and I'm now learning about 2 + 2 = 4, or I'm learning about where the river Amazon is, or anything like that. It's much more in depth in that, if you're actually able to appreciate it in that kind of way.
100% agree.
Who did you admire when you were young?
I think about this question, and I don't really get a satisfactory answer for myself. You want to be able to say your father, right? For me, I love my father, but my father worked in computers and programming and went to work every day. And when he came home, he was just dad, and we didn't really. I didn't understand what he was doing or how his work worked, and so I never really held him up like that. It's funny now. I do now. I have worked with the people who were doing the jobs that he did, and now I understand what he was doing. It's funny that way. And I think about my older brother, but I love my older brother, but I wanted to be the opposite of my older brother. And so I look around and try and look to see who my role models were. And I'll be honest, I didn't have role models in terms of real life people. I found the things that I would resonate with the most in terms of who I admired would be characters in books. I was always attracted in reading towards the noble people, to not nobility, but to people who had a noble manner of being. So I'd read books about like King Arthur, or I'd be books about knights or heroes or whoever, and those were the people that I would look up to in any given genre. I was always looking up to fictional characters who espoused the traits that I wanted to have. And so it's funny, I can't really say, hey, this person, that was my role model, or that's who I looked up to, but it was more about people that I discovered, even fictional characters that I discovered in my reading.
I think that's a brilliant answer, because I think there must be loads of people out there who feel the same. They'd like to have a person in their life that they're able to share things with or look up to. But I can think about conversations I've had with people, and they they escaped into literature, they escaped into music, they escaped into the arts, or something where they found something which was in there, and sometimes it's impactful, mainly because it's always there. It gives you a place you can always go to because they are reliable. You know that character's in that book, you know that journey, and it gives you a sense of something which you're craving for, whatever that happens to be. And so no, I think that's a great answer. I think there'll be loads of people out there who can really identify with that and really take some solace from it as well. I think that's the thing about life, it's absolutely different for everybody, and so You look around, you take the things that you can see, you feel the things that you feel, and then if it's good and it gives you something, then you go with it, and that's all you can do, because everyone's circumstances are different. So no, I absolutely love that.
What I've found interesting as I've gotten older, and I wish that I'd gotten into these when I was younger, but the biographies of great people are incredible for someone like me who related to literary characters who were fictional. If I had been reading biographies of real people that were the type of people that I wanted to look up to, I think it would have been more meaningful for me. In my 30s, as I read biographies of Winston Churchill and Teddy Roosevelt and other great people who have done great things, I find myself now as an adult being inspired by those, because it's not a fictional character. It's not somebody's imagination. It's a real person who had real struggles and real problems and real weaknesses, and still overcame or still accomplished great things in spite of those weaknesses. That's the kind of thing that inspires me today, and people that I look up to today as a result of that mindset.
Yeah, and I think in this day and age of social media and all that kind of thing, everyone's trying to put their best face on, aren't they? I'm doing this, I'm doing that, this has been brilliant for me. But actually, that authenticity and that vulnerability of being able to share the struggles in the journey to get where you are, I think speaks to people in a much more truthful way. And I think, like I say, if you can get that across in a biography, an autobiography, then those things really do connect to you, because I think that's what everyone can relate to.
I agree.
What was the best piece of advice you've ever been given, and who gave it to you?
I have to go back to my father on this one, because he really, really helped me out with this piece of advice. When I was a teenager, I must have been 17 or 18 at the time, and I had somehow miraculously found myself in a friendship. Right. And so there was a girl who lived down the street. Her name was Casey. And Casey and I were inseparable for probably 6 months. It feels like it was so much longer than that, but it was probably 6 to 8 months. And we would do everything together. And one night we were out late, and it wasn't a school night or anything like that. It was a weekend, but it was late, late, late. And so we were out gallivanting and doing whatever until 2 or 3 in the morning. And it wasn't like we were going to parties and getting in trouble. We were literally like walking around the neighborhood just talking. We did go like a long way away because we walked for so long, but we were just talking. And I came back and I found my father sitting in the living room. He was just sitting there awake, waiting for me. And he asked me where I'd been. And I told him everything. I told him where I was, what we were doing. I told him how far we went. It just was really open. And he really looked surprised. And the surprise on his face was because I didn't tell the truth that often back then. I was definitely a dishonest person in my teenage years. And I was good at it. I was such a quality liar. And so he could tell that I was telling the truth, and he was stunned. And he stopped and he said, "Okay, Jonathan, listen, I'm really irritated with you." And I'm just, obviously, I'm awake this late. I'm waiting for you. And if you ever do this again, these are going to be the consequences. But because you just told me the truth, I want to acknowledge that and say thank you. And so I'm going to let this be a warning. Don't do it again. And he went to bed. And that moment has stuck with me through my entire life, because I discovered at that point in time, it became very real for me, that it was easier to be honest, and it was more beneficial to be honest because honesty got me a better result than the best lie I could have told. And that started my path towards transforming away from being a dishonest person into being someone who's almost 100% honest. The only dishonesty I have in me now is when I might try and make somebody feel good if there's a situation, right? It's a positive kind of, okay, I'm going to say this thing that I may not fully believe because I want to help this person out. But other than that, I tell people the hardest things. I reveal the hardest things. And I find that my life is significantly better because I'm not trying to remember what I said to someone. I can just count on it having been the honest truth. And as long as I remember the truth, I'm good to go.
Yeah, that's brilliant, and I think that sort of connection that you get with the honesty, isn't it? And then when you get that feedback back from the person you've been honest with, and then you really understand that life can be so much different. And yeah, I think that's a really lovely story. I think that's some really insightful things there, which I really love the fact that it has such an impact from there on in as well. You know, it was one night on one day, but then it just takes on a whole new meaning for the rest of your life. It's a really great thing to hold on to.
You know, it really was a tipping point. The way you described it is 100% true. There was a before that moment and there was an after that moment. And it took a while for people to see, but it was that impactful.
And what advice would you give your younger self now?
Oh man. Hold on. Honestly, my younger self had it rough. It was rough. I contemplated suicide more than once. I at one point in my life, I believed that it could not get better. I remember my 21st birthday. I remember it very clearly. I was sitting let me give you just a tiny bit of background in my personality. I'm a strong personality and I'm not a needy personality. I'm very much the kind of person that if I need to go it alone, I can go it alone. And on my 21st birthday, I was sitting in my bedroom and I was alone, and I was so alone. And the weight of that moment really hit me, and I found myself, I actually, my mother called to wish me happy birthday, and we were talking, and I found myself, I ended up kind of breaking down and crying, and I was sobbing because I was so lonely, and I was so disappointed in the way that my life had gone. And so I like literally, I'm the antithesis of someone you would imagine crying to their mother on the phone. That's the only time in my life that that's ever happened, that I can ever think of crying to anybody. But it happened because I was in such pain. And so I would literally advise myself to hold on, because you can't change a lot of the things about yourself, and you can't, I mean, a lot of those experiences are part of who I am. You know, one of the reasons why I can connect to people today in such a meaningful way is that I've experienced the pain of loneliness. And so it means something to me to be able to take that pain away from somebody, or to be friends with somebody in a way where they're not expecting it. That's powerful. And so I don't think I'd want at this point to go back and change that, because then I couldn't do some of the things that I'm doing. But I would tell myself to hold on, because life changes so drastically from one year to the next, or 5 years, or 10 years. In 20 years, you can literally transform your life. In 10 years, you can transform your life. Just hold on and keep going. That's the advice I would give myself.
I really, really like that, and I think it gives a lot of hope and a lot of perspective for so many people. And I think if you can see all of these struggles that you may be going through, and almost helicopter look at it from above, and no matter how painful it is, if you can see it as a gift, if you can see it as part of that journey, because you don't know where that's going and you don't know what those emotions and those experiences are going to give you, it might be the greatest gift you could possibly have. And it's really difficult to see that in the time, but I think what you said there, hold on and just keep getting through it the next day and the next day. And even though it might feel hard to enjoy the ride, it is a ride, isn't it, from that sense, I think. And I think, if, like you said, if you can just hold on and get through it, just see what tomorrow and the next year or two has to offer. And then when you look back on it, then you can share this great advice as you are now with everybody, and just really help other people who may be going through the same sorts of things. I think that's really great advice.
Something that as you get older, it's easier, in a sense. At least it has been for me. Like, I've gone through different negative things, and it wasn't too long ago. I think it was in the last year. I had something just really negative happen, and what you described, kind of with the helicopter view, that's exactly how I felt as it was happening. I was like, okay, I looked down at it and was like, okay, this is gonna pass. This is gonna change. Things are gonna be unfortunate for a while, but it's not the end of the world. And even if it's the end of something, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of everything. And just live in it. Just live in it, let it happen, and figure out what the new situation is afterwards. And I remember exactly what it was now. And I won't go into the details of that, but I gave myself that exact advice. It helped me through it. It made it much easier, actually, because the experience of the past taught me that these situations that are negative in the moment aren't the end of the world.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I can really identify with that in terms of my life as well. And I think so many people listening are going to be resonating with that, and be able to hold that really, really close to their hearts too. So, looking forward now, what does your future look like?
Well, it's a great question for me, because I just announced what I hope is a life-changing kind of thing. Like I said, I've been in business for my whole life, and I've really worked my way up. I live a good life now. I have a good financial outlook. I've put in my time. I earned my education. I have an MBA. But I started this show on the side with Trivial Warfare, and it's grown, and it's being supported by so many people. And I found myself being challenged in the sense that I was taking it easy, or that's not the right word, because I was working too hard to say I was taking it easy, but I was taking the easy way out and just saying, I'm going to let things happen the way they happen, and this will never be a full-time business because of these reasons, et cetera, et cetera. And I wasn't challenging myself to get it where it could be. And various things have happened that have led me to change that outlook. And so a couple of weeks ago, actually it's September 1st, I announced that my goal is to make Trivial Warfare a full-time endeavor within the next 2 years. And as part of that, I changed our business model, which has been 100% donation-based. There were rewards that were good rewards that people would want, specifically the ability to come on the show. Has driven success up until this point, but I made a change where we're changing to a free model and premium model of episodes, where if you want to hear everything, you need to be donating. And so it was a big risk. It is a big risk. You risk alienating your audience. You risk losing your audience. You risk alienating your community and all those things. And so I made that announcement, and the response has been fantastic in the first few weeks here. People are really supportive of what I've described and what I say that I want to do, and that's an amazing feeling. And so I'm hopeful that within 2 years, we will grow to the point where I can actually leave my corporate job and produce the show full time. And if that is possible, if I am able to do that, then we're going to expand what we're doing dramatically, because I'll be working on it. It's not like, hey, I'm full time and now I'm relaxing and doing the same thing. No, it's going to be something where I'm producing all new types of content as a result of being able to work on it all the time. And so I'm really hopeful, and I'm looking forward to the chance to do that. But we will see. I'm a conservative person when it comes to my finances, and so I'm not going to make a decision that's bad for me or bad for my kid. But I've put in the work, and I'm putting in the work, and I desire an outcome, and so I've made my bed, I've made my play, and now I'm going to work towards it, and we're going to see what happens.
I'm really excited for you because I know all the hard work that you've been putting in, and I know how difficult these things are sometimes. But it really is just the fact that you can create your future, and sometimes, like you say, it unfolds and it happens naturally, and sometimes you just know there's something that you have to do that just gives it another impetus. And so yeah, I think that's a really interesting place to be, just to be able to that. I know inside me somewhere I need to do it slightly differently, or I've at least got to try. That's the thing. I don't know the outcome definitely, but I know I need to try. And I think to have a future that looks like that is exciting and also fulfilling, and also living the life that you want to live on your terms, which I think is probably the key for so many people if they can possibly get to that point. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where that goes.
You and me both, brother.
So just as we start to finish off, then, what podcast or book, video, film, song, or any resource has had the biggest impact on your life, and why was that?
I'm going to give you three. You know what though? It's probably not fair to. I'm thinking in terms of podcast specifically. You know what? I am literally gonna change my answer right here on the spot. So obviously, the right answer for me is my own. Trivial Warfare has changed my life more than anything ever has changed my life. But a close second to Trivial Warfare is the Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I remember when I first picked up that book, I had heard of it in my teenage years. And God, I wish I had read it in my teenage years, but I was way too want to be cool to read a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People when I was a teenager. And obviously I say want to be cool because I was definitively not cool. So I picked it up in my late 20s, early 30s, I think. And it is a life-changing book. It's not what you think it must be from the outside when you read it. And he talks about chapter after chapter of business experiences and how people are able to accomplish what they want to accomplish through giving people what it is that they need. Essentially, if I could summarize that book in just a couple of sentences, it's the idea that if you want to get what you want to get out of life, you need to give to other people what they want to get out of life. And if you give to them the thing they need, then they will more than happily give you what you need. And that's I mean, obviously that's a highly general synopsis, but it changed my framework as a selfish person in general. You know what I mean? We're all a little bit selfish. It changed my framework so that I started paying more attention to other people's needs and other people's desires and what other people wanted, and started taking more action to support those things. It could be as simple as, here's a tiny little example, a teeny tiny example, but I was chatting with someone recently and I found out they were in the hospital, and it made me sad that they were in the hospital, right? And I thought to myself, if I was in the hospital, the thing that would strike me most is kind of feeling alone and kind of being depressed that I'm there in the hospital and kind of away from my life, right? And so while I was chatting with that person, I ordered flowers and sent on behalf of the show. So not only is it just me, but I've roped in other people that I know love this person and want to see good things for them, and I addressed it from all of us. And so the next day, that person got flowers while they were in the hospital. And something as simple as that, I know that I've added joy and acceptance and love into that person's life with just the simplest act. And that kind of thing, that kind of action is something that I learned from that book, is pushing into other people and giving to other people. And that action and those actions reciprocate in such a meaningful way that it creates that cycle that I was describing earlier. And so I credit that book with a huge influence on my personality over the last 10 years.
Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. I've read that book, and you're absolutely right. It's not what you think it is when you set out on that journey, but it just is so impactful in so many ways. And I think you summarised it perfectly there. That in essence is exactly what it is. What's the best way for people to find out more? Especially you've been talking about your podcast and everything. What's the best way for people to find out more, listen to the podcast, and connect with you?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways. If you're listening to this show, you're obviously a podcast listener. So on your podcast app, if you search the word Trivial Warfare, you'll find us first. If you search the word trivia, we'll be pretty close to the top. On any of the social media channels, we would be at Trivial Warfare. You'll find us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. I think if you like trivia, if you like the idea of listening to a game show, and specifically one that's going to make you laugh and one that's going to make you think, there's a community of people that are out there that are probably just like you. Search for Trivial Warfare Army in Facebook, and you'll find the Trivial Warfare Army Facebook group. And in that group, you will find 2,000 plus of the best people in the world who love trivia, celebrate being smart without being jerks about it. And it's an awesome community, and we are always looking for more people to be a part of our community.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan, for sharing your wisdom and allowing us to learn from your experiences.
It's been my pleasure to talk to you, Mark. This has been a thoroughly enjoyable experience.
Thanks for listening to the Learning on Fire podcast. For more information, please visit educationonfire.com and follow the links from the homepage. This show is sponsored by the National Association for Primary Education. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.